In this video, we are going to be talking about this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and specifically we're going to be relating it to songwriting, of course. This is a channel called Songwriter Theory, and as I read this book, honestly, for me, this is probably the most revolutionary book to me personally that I've read since probably Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which I read probably like 5-6 years ago. So this book is fantastic overall, but one of the things I got from it was actually how to relate this to songwriting, because this is really a book that can relate to all areas of life. But of course, this is a songwriting YouTube channel, so I didn't want to miss the opportunity to talk about how the wisdom in this book can be leveraged by us as songwriters. So in this video specifically, we're going to be talking about the importance of habits to us as songwriters and why it's important to get into the habit of songwriting. And then in a follow-up video, we're going to talk about how to actually form that habit. And again, that's going to also be based off of the framework that is in this book. So let's dive in. One of the foundational concepts to this book is the idea of trying to get 1% better every single day. And the main idea of this is that habits are essentially a great way to provide some compound returns. Because if we work on getting just 1% better every day, over the course of a year, we'll end up being about 38 times better at something. And on the other hand, if we get 1% worse every day, we would become about 3% as good as we were to start with. So one of the main ideas of this is that we can almost automate ourselves to become much better at something simply by forming a habit. Because the difference between songwriting every single day for a year and missing 2 months worth of songwriting because we don't have the habit of songwriting, and we kind of just songwrite only when we feel like it or only when we have time, then there's going to be a massive difference in our results between the person that's going to commit to actually songwriting 15 minutes every single day and the person that accidentally goes a few weeks without songwriting and then a few months without songwriting. The difference is massive. One of the other main concepts is how habits are effectively the human version of automation. Of course, we can leverage machines and computers to automate things for us, but we can't actually automate our own behavior. But habits are about as close to that as we have. So just for example, if we are in the habit of tracking calories every day and really paying attention to what we eat every day and making sure we're eating a good amount, but not too much, and then we also have automated away our workouts by just getting the habit of working out, and we just work out every day without thinking about it, that's how you end up being fit without having to put any effort into it, or seeming to not have to put any effort into it. In the same way, if every time you are working from home and a meeting comes up and you need to pay attention to the meeting, but you're not really talking for most of the meeting, and you can kind of, practice your guitar scales while listening or your piano exercises while listening, that can be a great way to sort of automate getting better at the piano or the guitar. And one of the important elements of this automation of behavior that we get from forming habits is it effectively raises the baseline. If you think about it, even if maybe you struggle with certain types of eating, but you are in the habit of working out every day, your baseline level of fitness is going to be way higher than somebody who doesn't have the habit of either. Now, certainly the people that are going to be super fit all the time are the people that have effectively created a habit of eating well every day, but also the habit of working out every day. But just by having one thing as a habit, that raises the baseline. Just like as songwriters, if we have the habit of songwriting at least 15 minutes a day, the baseline to how bad we could get at songwriting or how much songwriting talent we could lose versus how much better at songwriting we're going to get is way higher than the person that maybe does 5 hours of songwriting during a Saturday and then misses the next week, but then does 10 hours the next Saturday, because that person is not going to be making consistent gains, and they're never going to formulate the habit of songwriting, because doing it once a week-ish is usually not going to be habit forming the way that doing something every day will be. And if you're in the habit of songwriting at least 15 minutes a day, the key word there is at least. Yeah, most days you might only have time for the 15 minutes, but there's going to be other days where that 15 minutes turns into half an hour or 2 hours, and you're ensuring to yourself that at least you're going to get 15 minutes of writing every day, and you're at least not going to break the chain where you go 2 months without songwriting at all, which if you add up 15 minutes a day over the course of 2 months, that is a ton of songwriting that you got done, even if 15 minutes a day is a very small sacrifice. So overall, the importance and value of creating a habit, specifically a habit of songwriting or a habit of practicing our instrument, is that it effectively makes it easier and more our default behavior to simply get better at that thing every single day. If you're in the habit of grabbing a video game to play after you come home from work every day, you don't have to train yourself or put any effort into doing that, right? Because it's all already a habit. You think to yourself, every time when I come home, I want to relax, therefore grab a video game, to the point that it becomes just default behavior. You don't have to think about it. It certainly isn't any effort. And it may sound silly to compare songwriting to video games, because video games is a consumption behavior, whereas songwriting, that's a creative behavior, which of course takes more effort. But overall, the idea of the habit is still the same. If you get in a habit that every time you eat, I'm going to go on a mile walk, eventually you just do it without even thinking, which is the ultimate level of automation that we can achieve as humans. And obviously we want to automate the good things that we want to commit to. And hopefully, since you're here, songwriting is one of those things. Another important element of habit change that's talked about in this book is the idea that habit change is what creates an actual identity change rather than just an outcome change. And an identity change is way more powerful than just an outcome change. And the basic idea of this concept is this. If you have a goal, say to clean your room, that's great. So you clean your room, and then what? Well, probably your room is eventually going to fall back into disarray because you didn't actually change the underlying habits that made your room a mess in the first place. Instead, you just set a goal to clean your room, you did it, and now it's going to steadily fall back into disarray over time. So in that case, you changed the outcome. You made it so that your room was now clean and wasn't anymore, but your identity as a person with a dirty room rather than a clean room really hasn't changed. But if you formulate the habit of always putting things back after you use them in your room and maybe sweeping every 3 days or whatever it might be, then you are training yourself into your identity being, I am now a person who has and maintains a clean room. So the basic idea is that your goal shouldn't be to write a song. Your goal should be to become a songwriter. And how habits connect with this is habits are what prove to ourselves that we are who we say we are. So if you say, you know what, I'm not just somebody who wrote a song, I'm a person who is a songwriter. The best way to really make that identity intrinsic to yourself and something that you hold firmly is to be in the habit of songwriting every day. Because every day that you work on songwriting and every song that you complete is something that reaffirms to yourself, hey, when I say I'm a songwriter, I'm not lying to myself. I really am a songwriter because, well, I wrote 12 songs now, and I songwrite every day, so of course I'm a songwriter. In the same way that you don't have to convince yourself that you are a software developer or whatever you do during your main job, right? You don't have to convince yourself of that. Why? Because you have proof every single day as you go to work. Yep, I'm a software developer. I develop software 8 hours today. So when you have a habit of songwriting every day, you are solidifying to yourself, yeah, I really am a songwriter, which then makes it even more easy for your default behavior every day to work on songwriting. And ultimately, it's way harder to change an identity than it is to change simply an outcome or a behavior. If you are a fit person, you're much more likely to get and stay fit than if you just are a person who is currently trying to lose 10 pounds, because that is something that's just an outcome. I just want to lose 10 pounds. But saying, no, I want to be a person who is committed to fitness is probably going to result in more lasting change. So overall, while it can be helpful to have goals like, hey, I want to complete an EP this year, that's a great thing. But something even more important is not just that end goal where once you're done with the goal, you're like, oh, okay, now what? Your goal instead would be more productive if it becomes something like, I want to become a songwriter and prove to myself over time, hey, I really can do this, and this really is who I am. And off of that last concept, James Clear talks about how overall systems are way better than goals, and goals on their own are not enough. And one of the arguments he makes for this is how every single person who goes to the Olympics has the exact same goal. They all want to win. Every single team wants to win the Super Bowl. So ultimately, the winners and losers both share the same goals. And then also, a goal achieved is just a moment in time. Oh, I won the gold medal. Now what? Whereas if we concentrate on systems instead, systems are more likely to actually help us to achieve the goals we want, but then also don't set all of our happiness and all of our desires on just achieving the goal or not. And then ironically make us more likely to actually achieve the goal because we're not concentrating on how much I want to win the Super Bowl, but instead how much can I make myself better, which then puts me in a position to be more likely to win the Super Bowl. And overall, probably the central point he makes with this systems over goals concept is that setting goals is really to win the game, whereas having systems is how you continue to play the game. And relating this to The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, which is also a fantastic book, really, in real life, there aren't just games. There isn't oh, we win this year. And even though lots of companies like to use that type of language that we're beating Microsoft or whatever it might be, that's not how life works. Ultimately, everything is an infinite game in the real world. Yes, a chess game has a definitive end, or a football game. But when it comes to life, say as songwriters, there is no winning or losing. You can't win this year at songwriting because, I don't know, you won enough awards or something. That's not how it works. Ultimately, the goal is to stay in the game long enough to eventually get good at what we're doing. So if you songwrite over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're likely to be really good at the end of that. Whereas if you just concentrate on winning this year, then it turns into something that's relatively short-sighted and is usually not very achievable. Because ultimately, you probably don't want to have a good year of songwriting, you want to have a good life of songwriting. So overall, it's much better to set yourself up to continue to play the game of songwriting rather than just have a simple goal like write an EP and that be it. Even though, again, I think it's a good goal every year to be something like I want to record and release an EP. I think that's a good goal, but it shouldn't be your only goal. It's not enough on its own. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, you may want to actually check out the book. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Really is one of the most revolutionary books that I have read for me personally. It really is revolutionary across the board. It's not something that just applies to, say, songwriting. I mean, it's not even about songwriting, but I still related it to songwriting in this video because it really is something that can apply to everything. It helped me with songwriting in the past couple months since I've read this. It helped me with creating content for Songwriter Theory and being more productive and more efficient at that. All to say, I think this book is helpful across the board. So be sure to check it out, and be sure to check out my free guide on 10 different ways to start writing a song. If you are new to songwriting or a seasoned vet, there should be something in there for you. Ultimately, I think one of the best ways to stay creative and to keep getting outside of our creative box is to just start writing songs from different standpoints. If you've never tried writing with lyrics first, or reverse engineering a song from a song title that you think is really cool, or if you've never tried actually starting with a melody instead of a chord progression, or a bass line instead of the chord progression, then you are certainly missing out. So be sure to check that out. Link in the description down below as well. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.